Stage 9 comes on Sunday the 7th of July and it's the second consecutive day in the high mountains of the Pyrenees. And the riders will be covering 5 of those mountains over the course of 168.5 kilometres. And 4 of those are first category, the longest of which is the Col de Peyresourde, which they'll be tackling in the opposite direction to that of last year. Stage 9. This is another tough day in the Pyrenees, but compared to the previous stage, this one ends downhill with a 30-kilometre long descent towards the finish line in Bagnères-de-Bigorre. It's a relatively short day in the saddle at only 168.5 kilometres, but with 5 hard climbs on the menu, it's going to be anything but easy. Starting out in Saint-Girons, the first 20 kilometres are flat before reaching the foot of the Col de Portet-d'Aspet. The 5.4 kilometres towards the top have an average gradient of 6.9% and make for a great place for a front group to get a gap. After the Col de Portet-d'Aspet, it's time for the Col de Mente. This category 1 climb has an average gradient of 7.7% and starts out very steeply with parts over 10% at the beginning. From the top of the Mente, there are 29 kilometres to the intermediate sprint of the day. In the past, we've seen riders like Thor Hushovd and Peter Sagan attacking early on these stages in order to get over the climbs in front of the other sprinters. This could very well be the case again on this stage. If any sprinters were up front for the intermediate sprint, they would most likely call it a day after this point. The final 91 kilometres of the stage include no less than 3 hard Category 1 climbs coming immediately after each other. The first one, the Col de Peyresourde, is 13.2 kilometres long and has an average gradient of 7%. Col de Val-Laurent-Azé starts after the Col de Peyresourde. Its 7.4 kilometres have a frightening average gradient of 8.3%, with parts over 10% at the beginning and near the top. From the top, there are almost 30 kilometres to the beginning of the final climb of the stage, La Horquette d'Ancizan. This is only the second time in the history of the Tour that this climb has been used, and many riders won't know what to expect. It's a tough climb at almost 10 kilometres long and an average gradient of 7.5%, but from the top there's still 30 kilometres to go to the finish, so the stage could very well end up with a sprint from a smaller group. This stage has breakaway written all over it, and opportunistic riders and those already out of the general classification will be extremely motivated for this stage. At the end of this stage, the riders and teams will be packing everything up and heading up to the northwest of France where they receive a much needed rest day. To find out more about a much flatter stage 10, just click here.